name is Justin. Here, I'm going to trade spots with you real quick. We're going to do an awkward dance. As Amanda said, I work at IDEO. So Rise, the startup that Jeff is involved with, was a startup in residence at IDEO a little bit more than a year ago. And when I first met them, I knew nothing about sleep. And kind of, in my mind, sleep was this thing that I surrendered to at the end of the day, usually not willingly. And I thought I could get as little of it as I kind of could and like not feel like a total maniac. And I would be totally, totally fine. And then I started learning about all this stuff, and my mind has kind of totally been blown. And I sleep more than I ever have in my adult life the past year. I feel better than I've ever felt in my entire adult life the past year. And I think a lot of that has to do with my sleeping habits that I've largely learned from this person next to me. So, Jeff?
Sure. Thanks. So yeah, I got interested in sleep because I was waking up in the morning feeling like crap. And you guys have probably felt that. And I was an engineer in undergrad, so I was up late at night with actually Leon in the back, my CTO. And we were like, why the hell are we feeling so bad in the morning? Can we do something about this? Fun fact, Chicago was the first sleep lab in the entire world, started in this city in 1927 at U Chicago, which is kind of cool. But it turned out it's this amazing place to study sleep. And I guess fast forward to today, that was kind of 6 years ago, we've been working specifically with professional athletes. So we work with the Bulls, we work with about 10% of the NFL, and it turns out that sleep is the most potent performance-enhancing activity that they can do. So almost every team today is taking sleep just as serious as they do strength conditioning and nutrition and mental training. And in fact, it's actually more important. So this was a study we did with the Dolphins. We worked with them this past season, and we had their entire team that was doing this reaction time test. So it's like on an iPad, and they tap when a box shows up. And these are the players on the team, and you can see that like just as their sleep increases, their reaction time score does as well. And like this is like, that's just what the data is. Like these guys there is nothing else that they can do that will like get that type of improvement. This was kind of interesting too, and obviously the general manager cared about this. But the players that were using like our sleep coaching app and system that were improving their sleep were actually reacting 8% faster than the other group of the team. And so like when they saw this, they were just like, obviously we need to do this. Like this is a no-brainer. There's nothing else we can do that's going to have that type of impact. So yeah, Justin.
So that's for fancy NFL players, and unless I am mistaken, no one in this room plays in the NFL. Okay. So what about like us normal people who aren't professional athletes? So sleep affects us as well. So this was from an academic study done on what is your reaction time like given how much time you sleep. So when you sleep for 9 hours a night, you are at 100% of your best possible reaction time, right? You are going to be as fast as you possibly can be. When you sleep for 7 hours, you're at about 89% of your best reaction time. When you sleep for 5 hours, you're at 77%, and then it really goes off when you sleep for 3 hours, and you are at 30%. So a question for everyone here, anyone want to take a guess at what percentage of your reaction time you are at when you are legally drunk? 70? 85. So by the time you sleep about 6 hours a night, you are legally drunk. 6 and 7. You're legally drunk. How many of you are legally drunk right now? So, all right, here is what we're going to talk about today. First, we are going to explain to you some of the basics of sleep. So you have a sleep need, there's sleep debt, what is your circadian rhythm and how does it work? And then in the second half of the talk, we're going to tell you how to take control of your sleep. So how to sleep great, how to wake up feeling awesome, and hopefully we'll have some time to talk about some myths and answer some questions.
So we're going to boil down all of sleep science for you in like a couple minutes here. But the first thing that everyone needs to know is that you have something called a sleep need. This is just how much sleep you need at night to be performing at your optimal the next day. And everyone has heard 8 hours before. So that actually comes from the research that discusses that the average need in the population is slightly over 8 hours, like 8 hours and 17 to be exact. So that's like height and weight. So there's people in this room that will only be performing at their optimal and they're getting 9.5. There's probably 1 or 2 of you. Then there's also 1 or 2 of you that can perform optimally at 6. But most of you are going to be within that, really that 7 to 8, 8.5 range. And so that's really what's going on here. Justin, you want to talk about how this builds up over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So who has heard of sleep debt? Oh, look at this. All right. You all know more about this than I think the average audience does. So sleep debt is a real thing. And the best way to think about sleep debt is you have your personal sleep need, whether that is 5 hours a night or 9 hours a night. And for every hour underneath that you sleep, you accumulate sleep debt. And I think the real mind-bending part when Jeff first taught me about this, you can accumulate up to 40 hours of sleep debt over a period of multiple weeks, which sounds really crazy until you look at this. I promise this is going to be interesting chart. So let me talk you through this, because I think when you realize just how dumb accumulating a lot of sleep debt can make you, this is the thing that really forced me to change my behavior. So this is the baseline night. So everybody in this group, some of them over time are going to sleep for 3 hours, 5 hours, 7 hours, or 9 hours, depending on the little color code over there. On the baseline night, everybody sleeps for their full 9 hours. And then on the first experimental night, they sleep whatever their little color code is based on. They go through that for a full 7 nights, and then at the end, they have 3 recovery nights. So across the bottom, you can see the number of nights. Over here on the side, you can see the number of mental lapses they made on a test. So the person 9 hours a night, you can see they're doing great, right? They don't make very, very few errors on the test. The person who is sleeping for 5 hours a night, it starts to creep up. And the less sleep they get, the more sleep debt they had over time. What's really stunning is the person who sleeps for 3 hours a night. It skyrockets. But amazingly, after their recovery night, so even after a full night of 9 hours of sleep, the person who sleeps for 3 hours a night is still pretty dumb. And even after 3 nights of sleeping for 9 hours a night, they remain pretty dumb. So I think the lesson from this is that how you feel today actually has less to do with how you slept last night than it does with how you slept over the prior 2 weeks. So there's some good news to this, which is that if you have a really big presentation tomorrow and you have to stay up all night, but you've been sleeping great, you're probably going to be okay. And on the flip side, if you all of a sudden are not sleeping really at all and then decide, tomorrow's a big day, I'm going to get a great night of sleep and be fine, not so much. But it gets even worse.
So this is the part that makes this really difficult. So on the left is what Justin just showed, right? Where basically you have different groups that are sleeping different amount, and this is over, in this case, 2 weeks. And you can see that the 6 hour and 4 hour group, they just have more lapses as they're continuing to build up sleep debt. Now, on the right is a subjective sleepiness questionnaire that they gave to all the people on the left. And what do you notice here? Well, the 8 hour group is they're kind of steady, they're not feeling very sleepy. But the 6 hour and 4 hour groups, the first couple days, you do notice that their kind of subjective sleepiness goes up. But by the end of that second week, they're really only reporting that they're feeling slightly sleepy. And you can see that their objective performance just keeps on degrading. So the idea here is that your body or your brain actually adapts to the amount of sleep that you're having in terms of telling you that it's okay, you're all right, while your performance is just getting worse and worse. And that's what makes this so difficult, because it's hard to realize that you're in this phase or this phase, because your brain is telling you you're fine, you're not that sleepy.
So to sum all of this up, kind of sum it up scientifically, sleep debt fucks you up. Using the technical language here. So that's the second thing, right? So first thing is you each have a unique individual sleep need. The second thing, kind of related to sleep need, is your sleep debt, and it accumulates over time. And the third thing you need to understand is your circadian rhythm, or the clock in your head.
So you actually have a clock in your head, okay? And we can talk about, I won't even get into it, but there's a part in your brain that's responsible for telling every cell in your body, both neurons in your brain, but also muscle cells, when to be active and when to be sleeping, literally when to be inactive. And so here's what this looks like over time. So everyone in this room has this clock literally ticking right now, and everyone has this curve of performance that looks like this, okay? So these times are going to be different based on your own individual body. But in this case, you're going to have a morning sort of peak where you're going to be feeling pretty good, do good work. Your flexibility is higher here, your body temperature, your metabolism, your energy, your mental acuity. But then in this early afternoon period, you actually have this lull. And like everyone's probably felt that, like after a big lunch, you kind of feel like, sleepy, your eyelids are heavy. It's not related to how much food you eat. It's just part of your body clock telling you to actually wind down. Great time to take a 20-minute nap, by the way. And then in the afternoon, you have what's called the wake maintenance zone. And this is when you're at your most alert, most creative, most juiced. And this is when most world records are also broken during this time. And then obviously we can see this biological night here. So let's take a look at like the impact of this, because I think this is really fascinating. I was actually giving this similar talk to an NFL team, and the head coach, this was at the Bengals, and the head coach saw this, and he's like, let's talk for 2 hours after this. And like literally in this guy's office, talking about what you're about to see. So this is looking at the past 40 years of Monday night football games. And if you're not a football fan, that's okay. The reason why they looked at these games is because they're always at 8:30 Eastern. So they always start at 8:30 Eastern, go to 11:30 Eastern. So if you're an East Coast team, your second, the third and fourth quarters of the game, the end of the game, your body is already taking you down into the lull, into biological night. Now, if you're a West Coast team, you guys are already seeing this and nodding your heads. You're playing most of the game in your circadian, like your most advantaged circadian state. So just if we look at the past 40 years of game data, like what do you think happens to win rate? Like obviously you think West Coast teams win, but like what percentage more maybe do you think they win? 20% more? So that's actually not so far off. It's about 66% of the time just flat out, but 70% of the time when you take into account how good the teams are. So West Coast teams just win 70% of the time, which is really, really impressive. I mean, that's unbelievable.
So our circadian rhythm is kind of governed by two things. So one is your chronotype. So kind of there is such a thing as being a morning person or a late person. So kind of that curve is the same, although the times on it might differ for everybody in this room. The other thing that controls it is blue light. So there's all kinds of light, right? Like right now there's a spectrum of light that's hitting our eyeballs, and a lot of that light hits receptors that send a visual signal into our brain. So it's how we see what's happening around us. There's also a whole set of receptors that are not sending any visual signal to your brain. They're called melanopsin. They are all over your eye. In fact, this is a dissected eyeball. And the blue is the melanopsin cells. So melanopsin cells are really cool. So they receive blue light. They work when your eyelids are closed. So blue light will pass through your eyelids, hit melanopsin, and it sends a signal to your brain saying, don't produce melatonin, which is the sleep hormone. So as long as blue light is hitting your eyes, open or closed, your body is not producing the sleep hormone, which is how you get really deep, restful, restorative sleep. So if you have a Mac and you've put Flux on it, if you have an iPhone and you're using Night Shift, those things are really great because they are major sources of light close to your eyeballs that are kind of beaming these things directly into it. Those would be all you needed if all that you did was sit in a dark room with a sheet over your head with nothing but your phone or your computer. We both know that's not the case. And so the blue light that is around us really messes us up. All right, that's the basics of sleep. So you've got sleep need, sleep debt, your circadian rhythm, which is governed by blue light. Let's now talk about how to sleep great.
So there's a couple things that you can do. Like you've probably heard hundreds of different tips and articles and whatnot, but there's a couple items and things that you can do that have a lot of science behind them and will help increase the quality of sleep that you get and just make the time that you're spending sleeping much more efficient. And then we've also got some behavioral tips in here as well. So these orange glasses up here, if you just go to Amazon and type in orange glasses, what those are is they're kind of like Flux for your entire eyeball. And what they'll do is they block out all the blue light at night, and they help your brain release melatonin. And they seem a little funky, but they're incredibly, incredibly powerful. And you'll start to put them on like an hour before you want to go to bed. You can watch Netflix, do whatever you're going to do. At one point, I got so deep into this that I didn't wear the glasses, but I walked around with a candle, like in my house. I would take showers with a candle because I wanted to reduce my light exposure at night for this reason. So now I just wear the orange glasses.
So you say a few things. So one is you wear these orange glasses, you block out blue light. Secondly, you get your room really, really dark at night, or you wear the sleep mask, and so that blocks out all blue light. And the last and most important thing you can do is be a fucking grown-up and have a fucking bedtime. This is probably the hardest piece of advice. I mean, this is funny, but it's the hardest piece of advice we're giving you. I go to bed at 10:30 every night. It's really hard to do. It causes arguments. I stayed up way too late last night watching Handmaid's Tale, which is really good. And I got sucked into it, and it's like 10:45, and I'm like, shit, I missed my bedtime target. I'm feeling it today. Like, I'm a little sweaty. I'm a little tired. But once you get into actually having a bedtime and going to bed at the same time every night, you feel dramatically better. It's really hard, but it is absolutely worth it.
Sweet. All right, so we'll kind of finish up here with just talking about the fact that there are literally hundreds of aids and tips. There's Ambien you can take. There's all sorts of pills and remedies and weird roots and teas that you can drink. The things that we just talked about, the last three, so glasses, mask, and being a grown-up. If you can do those three, like, that's going to get you 99% of the way there. And if it doesn't, go see a sleep physician, or just call me. Like, my number will be posted. Like, you can probably get in touch with me and we can talk more. But those are the three biggest things that you can do. And they're all things that everyone in this room can do, like, literally right now. That doesn't mean they're easy to do. So we can talk about tips after that. Justin, you want to talk about how to wake up in the morning? Because that kind of sucks.
Yeah, totally. So waking up is not fun. And the unfortunate part is that even when you wake up after doing all of these things, it's still going to be hard to get up. Because if you remember back to that circadian rhythm, the first kind of hour and a half in the morning, we're kind of groggy, we're fuzzy, we're still not all together, and that's part of our circadian rhythm, right? So waking up is always going to be hard. So the first thing I want to tell you is kind of like if you're Fitbit or you have a bed sensor that's like, oh, I'm going to wake you up when you're in your least restful. Garbage. Don't do it. Get the extra 20 minutes of sleep, because waking up is always going to be challenging. Just deal with waking up being hard and get the extra sleep. It's not worth accumulating an hour of sleep debt over the course of a week so you can wake up and have kind of a mental trick that you think you're well rested. It just doesn't work. What you can do, however, and this has made a big difference for me, is wake up with light instead of sound. So I have a Philips Hue system. So this is a picture of my bedside. It's a little dated now, so we changed some stuff. But it's a picture of my bedside. So you can see these are my really svelte orange glasses with an elastic backing, because I thought it was a little more comfortable. Certainly looks better. And this is the light bowls. I don't remember what it's called, but it's in the Philips Hue family of products. And what's really cool about it is you can adjust the spectrum. So at about 15 minutes before a sound alarm goes off, this turns on at full brightness to the bluest of blue lights about 5 inches from my head. And I'm going to say 95% of the time I am awake before my sound alarm actually goes off, especially if I've been hitting my bedtime target. And I wake up not in a like, oh, what the fuck is going on around me kind of moment, but in a like, oh, like, I'm awake now. I should probably get out of bed. And it's dramatically better to get out of bed in the mornings.
If you don't have one of these fancy lights, what you can do is just go near your window or like go outside for a couple minutes, and that's going to give you the same benefit without having to spend that money. So we can talk. Yeah, we've got a couple more minutes. Do people here have questions that they want to go through? So this is a very good question, and it turns out to be that, yes, as you age, actually age 20 is the latest you will ever be in your entire life, meaning your brain releases the sleep hormone melatonin later, than as late as will be, and then every year after that, it starts releasing melatonin earlier and earlier until around age 60. So yes, as you get older, it does shift earlier, and on average, women are also an hour earlier than men. Obviously, everyone's different. Yeah, disco hypothesis is pretty cool and related to this, but the idea that like everyone used to think that the young people are out late at night because the discos are out and it's all socially constructed and that's why people are staying up later. It turns out that a bunch of researchers that study circadian rhythms went around the world to African tribes where there are no discos, and you see the same type of circadian patterns. And the theory is, from more of an anthropological idea, is that you need someone up, kind of guarding and awake at all hours of the day to keep the fire, warm and all that sort of stuff. So that's a fun one. the answer to this is that when you're talking about sleep need, we're really talking about the time that you're physiologically asleep. So that being said, you are physiologically asleep when, like, if you've ever been in a class, or like if some of you are really tired right now and you're kind of zoning out, that's actually stage 1 sleep. So yeah, so we'd count that all the way through. But if you're kind of laying there preparing, that doesn't quite count. Most sleep aids that you're used to taking, so if it's Ambien, if it's marijuana, if it's alcohol, any sort of drug that has any sort of hypnotic effect actually changes what's called your sleep architecture. So your brain goes through these stages that it self-optimizes for each night, depending on what you did during the day, and it totally changes the percentage of these cycles that you go through. So now that marijuana is legal, I still don't smoke largely for that reason. But from California, that's it's a big thing over there. But that's really the reason why. Ambien, the same thing. Antidepressants also. So any sort of external drug that you're taking does have an impact on your sleep architecture. And so if you're not feeling rested, not feeling awake, and you are using those other substances, just it's being aware that that does have an impact, and just being mindful that's happening.
So one sleep aid I'm realizing we forgot to cover, which is actually really important, is naps. Naps count. So if you were trying to work off sleep or sleep off sleep debt, naps count.
So the direct answer to the question is yes, but not in the way you might expect. It really, the thing about temperature, mattresses, pillows, sheets, all of that, and how it affects your sleep and your sleep quality is that as long as it's comfortable enough to be sleeping, it's good enough. So it's not like if you get like a slightly better mattress, you're going to be sleeping slightly better or more efficiently. So same thing with temperature. Sleep in a cooler environment is oftentimes a little bit better than a hotter one, just because you won't wake up. But don't be too cold, because then you'll wake up. So sleep apnea, for those of you that don't know, it affects quite a few people in the NFL. Actually, 30% of the players we work with have it because they're just trained to be massive. There's different types, but it's genetics. There's a lot of factors. But it's actually what happens is when you're sleeping, you don't get as much oxygen to your brain, and you're in some sense like not suffocating, but in the extreme cases, you are suffocating during sleep. And so if you're not getting oxygen, the quality of your sleep, it obviously goes way down, and you wake up throughout the night tons of times, like hundreds of times. So what the way to solve this is they basically have this machine that forces air down your throat and actually forces you to get oxygen. And it seems kind of weird, but it works very, very well if you can do it. So that's a very good question. A couple different ways to do this at sort of different levels of increasing fidelity, I guess you could say. The first and probably simplest one is just to kind of think how you have like a subjective idea of like how much you feel like you need. Like think back to a time when you were on vacation, maybe you didn't have a ton of work going on. Like about how much were you sleeping? Was it 8.5? Was it 9? That's probably somewhere pretty close to about what your sleep need is. But there are a couple formal ways you can do it. Like you can actually go into a sleep lab and figure it out. We're working on a couple different algorithms that make it much easier to do while not having to kind of do that as well. But the easiest would be, go on vacation and you can almost do like a sleep cleanse and just literally sleep as much as you possibly can for, a couple weeks and see how much you're ultimately sleeping at the end of that. Working out helps with sleep. So at a population level, if you get some minutes of working out, that definitely helps with sleep. Now, it is a little bit of a controversy how many minutes within when you start to initiate sleep that you can actually finish a workout, meaning like if you're going to go to bed at 10, can you start your workout at 9? Is that okay? There's some research that suggests it's not a problem, some research that suggests it is, so we don't know. But what I would say is ultimately just make sure you're getting some minutes of working out and try to, within 2 or 3 hours, to be safe, don't work out really intensely.
Heavily based on personal experience.
Yes, very heavily, and the reason behind is that TVs emit a lot of blue light. And so, yes, there's a mental side of this, but just biologically, you don't have melatonin in your system. And so that's why wearing the orange glasses can really help.
So I'll build on that. Something else that I've done is, so I recently deleted Facebook, which has been fun. I try not to check Twitter or Instagram for an hour before bed. Those are services that are heavily engineered to produce little hits of dopamine, which can also interfere with the quality of your sleep. So I try and be completely off of social media and screens for an hour before bed. I break the rule with my Kindle, but I turn the backlight off and then just have like an orange light on.
Yeah, so that's a good one. Sound does have an impact in the same way you think about temperature and all the humidity, you could even say. So you want to make sure that it's in a you're in a quiet space, that you're not being woken up. But for a lot of people, listening to podcasts is a way to kind of wind down mentally, and having a routine like that is very, very beneficial. So thinking about your routine as well is important. Yeah, when you think about naps or any performance event, obviously you want to be at your peak during that event. So if you can, so you want to think about is how do you get as much sleep leading up to that event? So if you're a performer at night, can you see if you can get a 20-minute nap in during your lunch break? And honestly, a 20-minute power nap is going to be 3 to 4x the effects of coffee, and it'll last a lot longer. It'll last the whole day. It'll also, if you take a nap late at night, it can also interfere with that night of sleep. So try and take your naps, between noon and let's say 4 or 5 o'clock.
One of the things, because we talked about caffeine there, I have now cut out all caffeine after 1 or 2 p.m. I've noticed that also makes a really big difference. I think caffeine has a pretty long effect in the body, and so cutting out caffeine, midday, early afternoon has been a big difference maker for me.
So the first question, can you change your sleep need? Nothing yet, although the military is probably spending millions and millions of dollars on that. But nothing we know of, and that's why we kind of title this talk Hacking Sleep, because there's really no way to hack it. You have to understand how it works, and then you can take control over it. Justin, if you want to talk about the second point.
Yeah, so the light alarm's not going to work if you wear the mask. I just went around and made my room really, really dark. So kind of where we live, there's one large bank of windows, kind of like we live in a big box condo. And so we just got blackout shades. And then I went around with electrical tape and covered everything on electronic devices. So, it is pitch black. Oh, the other thing that I did, this one actually was a big deal. I put a dimmer in the bathroom. So when we go to bed, we turn the lights all the way down. So if you do have to wake up in the middle of the night, you turn on the lights. It's not like that blinding kind of when you're in a hotel and it kind of messes you up. Yeah.
Thank you. You guys, this was awesome. Justin, Jeff, thank you so much for your time.